Looking back on my college years, I remember a time when I thought I had found the perfect match. It was in our senior year of college when we met at a party, and our connection was instant. She was a stunning blonde with tanned skin that could have easily landed her on the cover of a magazine. However, it wasn't just her physical beauty that caught my eye. She was a kind, caring, and thoughtful person who had an active social life with numerous friends. I appreciated how well she blended into my group of friends. During the 3 years we knew each other, our circles of friends effortlessly blended. Some of our mutual friends even began dating each other, which made those years some of the happiest of my life. Graduate studies in finance. I couldn't help but notice her intellect, and Ingenio had a degree in contract law. She was certainly making her own strides in her career, not to toot my own horn, but I am not far behind in my appearance either at 190 pounds. I enjoyed going to the gym and maintaining a healthy physique. While I was not necessarily a super athlete, it was safe to say I had a bit of muscle in my bones. However, despite my physical appearance, I was incredibly shy and did not have much experience in the realm of romantic relationships. Before I met her, from the moment we met, I knew she was someone special. Our first night together was nothing short of magical, and we found ourselves unable to stop talking to each other from there. Our connection only deepened. We began texting and calling each other daily, and before I knew it, we had weekly dates. After a year, he moved with me when I got a new job. What made our relationship even more special was the fact that we had the full support of each other's families. I loved his family, and they loved their family, and they loved me. While his father was a little distant with me, as he was with everyone, his mother and I got along very well. Looking back on those early days, I can only describe it as a whirlwind romance that seemed too good to be true. Looking back on those years of happiness, it's hard to believe that everything ended so abruptly. We had traveled the world together, we had taken breathtaking hikes, and enjoyed some luxurious vacations. Life couldn't have been better. And then I proposed to her. To this day, I can still remember the feeling of joy that ran through my veins when she said yes. It was like all my dreams had come true in that moment. From that moment on, she took over all the wedding planning. We talked about our future together and all the amazing things we wanted to do. Buy a house, have kids, and go on family trips. It was a time of hope and excitement, and I couldn't wait to start our new life together. But then everything changed one night. When we were both returning to our apartment, I noticed she was a little distant. It was a subtle change, but one I couldn't ignore. We had always been incredibly affectionate with each other, so her sudden coldness was alarming at first. It only happened once a week, but then it became more frequent. If it weren't for my habit of listening to edit on YouTube, I might not have noticed the change at all. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't help but wait and watch, trying to figure out what was going on with our once perfect relationship. These episodes of ignoring me would only last a couple of hours, and then I would be back to my old self. But after 6 months had passed and our wedding was only a year away, she would behave like this almost every night. It was a confusing and painful time, and I couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong. I had always thought we were meant to be together forever, but now I wasn't so sure. The future we had once talked about seemed to fade away, and I was left with nothing but questions and doubts. Despite our strong connection, the great relationship we had with our respective parents, things began to change between us. I met her mother for the first time and couldn't help but notice the striking resemblance between them. They both looked the same, stunning with just a few gray strands in her mother's long, thick blonde hair that added a touch of maturity and elegance to her appearance. I couldn't shake the feeling that this detail would somehow become important. We had just celebrated Thanksgiving at her parents' home in Louisville, Kentucky, an annual tradition that we always looked forward to. However, this time something was wrong during dinner. She was very distant with me, which was unusual because we were always very affectionate with each other. It turned out that her observant mother noticed the tension between us and decided to take her daughter aside to talk with her. I could hear their muffled argument from the other room, and that only increased my confusion and worry after the heated exchange. They both rejoined the family as if nothing had happened, but I was left wondering what could have caused such a sudden change in her behavior towards me. When I finally gathered the courage to confront her about it, she refused to discuss the matter further and asked me to wait until we got home to talk about it. Deep down, I knew something was wrong, but I chose ignoring my gut feeling. thinking that we could get through anything as long as she loved us. However, I didn't know that this was just the beginning of the end for us afterwards. When we got back home, I confronted her about her distant behavior. She was reluctant to discuss it, but after a week of pressuring her, she finally came clean and confessed that a coworker had been showing interest in her, wanted to be H with me. So she gave me her phone and allowed me to read her texts. However, as I scrolled through the conversation, I noticed that all the texts that would have occurred during the time period she had been pulling away from me were deleted, although there was nothing inappropriate in the remaining messages. The ones that were missing made me suspicious. In an effort to ease my doubts, I decided to turn on the tracker on her phone. Since we shared the same phone plan, I thought it would be a simple way to reassure myself and confirm that I was not doing anything wrong. I did not know that this decision would have significant repercussions on our relationship in the future. However, things got worse. When my girlfriend went to her company Christmas party, I was unable to attend due to food poisoning, but I was checking her location on my phone. It started at a restaurant. Then she went to the party venue and to a bar. Everything was normal until I saw that her phone had stopped at a hotel downtown. At that moment, I was feeling terrible. Not only because of the food poisoning, but also because of what I had just discovered. I fell asleep from sheer exhaustion at 2 a.m., but when I woke up at 7 a.m., she was still at the hotel. This news hit me strong, and I was left feeling betrayed and confused by what had happened. After her strange behavior at her parents' house during Thanksgiving, I had a suspicion that something was wrong in our relationship. I couldn't put my finger on it, but her body language towards me had changed. However, it wasn't until a few weeks later that she finally confessed that a guy from her work was trying to get to know her better. He showed me his phone, but I realized that all the text messages that would have happened during the times when she was distant from me were deleted. Even though there was nothing inappropriate in the texts, I still had a feeling that something was wrong. My suspicions were confirmed when she went to attend the Christmas party without me. I had planned to go, but unfortunately I got sick from food poisoning and had to. I left, she went with a friend, and I told her to have a good time, and that I would see her in the morning. While I was lying in bed, feeling miserable and barely able to move, I decided to check her location on my phone. At first, everything seemed normal, as I went to a restaurant, then to the party venue, and then to a bar. However, when I saw her phone stop at a hotel downtown, I knew something was wrong. I felt bad in every way imaginable, and as I tried to get some rest, I saw that she was still at the hotel when I woke up a few hours later when she finally came home at noon. I asked her about her night, not mentioning anything about knowing her locations. She talked about the restaurant, the party, and the bar. But then she said she went to her friend's house to spend the night. This was the first lie, and I felt even more distrustful. Over the next 3 months, he started working later and later, and when I asked him about it, he became defensive. His behavior towards me and towards his mother, he became more and more distant, which made me believe there was something more. Despite my suspicions, I kept my thoughts to myself. However, 2 weeks later, I received good news at work. I was given a new project that required me to fly to the Midwest Monday through Friday Durant, and the next 5 weeks, and I was coming up with a raise when I shared the news with my fiancée. She seemed thrilled for me. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was excited for the wrong reasons, so I went online and ordered 4 SP motion cameras for our apartment. I placed them in strategic locations like the living room, kitchen, bedroom, and hallway, and connected them to a hidden network to protect them, and waited for what I feared would happen. Then, during my first week out, my girlfriend invited her friends over 2 nights in a row, and never had to work late once. However, things took a sharp turn on the 3rd night. When she invited a guy over, I became furious. Sitting alone in my hotel room, I found myself yelling at him at the computer screen, hurling at her every insult I could think of. Then, they started engaging in adult activities. The worst part was when I decided to call her to see how her day was going, and she answered the phone while I was still in the act with him. She told me she was at the gym working out, but her labored breathing told a different story. When I got home, Friday night, I completely ignored her and went straight to bed the next day. I got up early and went for a bike ride to clear my head. I was so consumed with anger and betrayal that I biked over 50 miles without even realizing it was the furthest I had ever biked before, with my previous record being 30 miles. But that day I pushed myself to 105.6 miles. When I was 105.6 miles when I got home, I was completely exhausted. So I took a shower to cool off later that night. We went out with our friends and had a wild time drinking and partying like there was no tomorrow. I couldn't help but wonder if the time we had that night was considered breakup time, even though she was still completely oblivious to the fact that I was planning to end things between us. Emotions were running high inside me as I dealt with a mix of heartbreak, anger, and betrayal, all at once. It was hard to accept the fact that the woman who used to be so attentive was now oblivious to my hurt. The intensity of my emotions was compounded by the fact that I loved her very much. It wasn't until I confided in one of our mutual friends that I found out that everyone knew about her infidelity for months. The realizing that everyone felt sorry for me, but chose not to say anything, made me feel even more hurt and betrayed. Looking back, now I see that they gradually stopped asking us out about 3 months before. Despite everything, I decided to try one last time and win her back. So I planned an entire weekend full of activities to pamper her in every way possible. Let's make sure she started crying, and I knew the guilt was finally coming to the surface. I asked her what was wrong, and she offered to listen to her if she had anything to confess or needed forgiveness. All she could say was how much she loved me, which hurt even more, considering the 4 videos I had of her and the other guy engaging in adult acts in our apartment during my long trips to the Midwest over the course of 10 weeks. I couldn't help but the feeling that everything was going wrong in my relationship despite being away from home. I stayed attentive and commutative with her every weekend in the hopes of maintaining our connection. It wasn't until I returned home that my fears were confirmed. I discovered over 41 hours of footage on my recording devices, documenting my partner's adult encounters with a coworker while I was away. The most amazing thing was that not once did she claim that she was working late during my travels. I felt completely emasculated. I even gave her another chance as a beta of sorts. I knew I couldn't continue the relationship any longer. I couldn't trust her, and the thought of her being intimate with someone else while I was away consumed me with jealousy and anger. With a heavy-hearted and set mind, I began to come up with a plan to break up with the toxic relationship. I created a 12-step getaway plan in hopes of distancing myself from her and starting over. It was a difficult decision to make, but I knew it was the only way forward for my emotional well-being. I had to leave behind the person I thought I knew and loved and begin the journey to healing and move on. 1. Gather evidence. 2. Get her out of the way in order to execute my plan. I scheduled a 2-week exclusive getaway for us at an all-inclusive resort, Barbados. I was then a week before the trip. I told her I had to back out, and I told her to take a friend. I knew it was over when she showed no disappointment that she couldn't make it. The lease on our apartment was up 3 days into her trip, and I was the only signature on the lease. 4. Find a job in another city. The company I had been helping out in the Midwest had offered me a job with a slight pay raise. 5. Find a new place to live, got an apartment at the aforementioned location when she's gone, do the following. 6. Take her to the airport, come home and pack all her stuff. Same day. Saturday. 7. Get a new phone number, phone, email, cancel, all social media. 8. We completely split up when it came to finances. We withdrew all the money from our joint accounts and then closed them. I put all her money in an envelope and packed it in her stuff on Monday the 9th. Asked the moving company to pack up all my stuff and send it to my new destination. 10. Take all her stuff to her mother's house, 600 miles away. All my fiance's belongings end up in the back and the box of my F-250 Krupp. Tuesday through Saturday. 11. Give her mother the evidence. 12. My new life begins. It was a difficult decision for me to pack up my ex-fiance's stuff, as I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing anything illegal or unethical. I packed all her belongings thoroughly, and I must admit it was a heartbreaking experience. I had never cried so much in my life. I had always read stories in Reddit about other people and significant others who promised not to cheat again after getting caught but continued to do so. I was hoping my ex-fiancé would confess her infidelity and that we could work towards forgiveness and moving on. Unfortunately, she never did. There were times when she came close to telling the truth, but the secret was too hard for her to reveal. On Tuesday morning of my departure, I left our apartment located north of DC for the last time. It was a 10-hour drive to her mother's house, and I was not prepared for what awaited me when I arrived. I arrived at her mother's house around 8 p.m., and I expected her to be surprised to see me, since I had arrived unannounced. Her residence was located in a gated community, so I had to call her house from the front gate, and when I arrived, she was waiting for me outside. It was obvious she had been crying, and she hugged me, sobbing uncontrollably, stating she thought her husband was cheating on her with a younger, thinner, more beautiful woman. I was stunned and held her for about 10 minutes, as she cried on my right shoulder, getting soaked. After she had recomposed herself, I asked if we could go inside and talk. We went inside, and I asked her where her husband was. She said he told her he was going fishing with his friends at a remote cabin that was an hour away. He added that he hates fishing. She gave me all the clues she had noticed, and apparently he had been cheating on her for a year. We decided to investigate further and found a full charge on her credit card for a 5-star hotel that was only 20 minutes away. One more call. She later confirmed that her husband was staying at the hotel with his lover. After entering, I showed her the evidence I had collected about my ex-fiancé's infidelity, and she was shocked to see the truth exposed. In front of her, we both cried and hugged each other for what seemed like an eternity as we sat. There, she suggested that once our intense days together were over, I said goodbye and headed to my new destination when my ex-fiancé returned. I had already canceled my phone before she returned. So, when she called for a ride, the line was disconnected. She indicated that she could not reach me. Her lover picked her up and left her at the door, where a new couple, new tenants, responded after many attempts to contact me. She went to live with her friends as she knew that her roommate worked. She was already married. Finally, she called her mother in a panic, who told her that she had come and left all her belongings along with all her money 600 miles away, but did not mention anything about our affair. Her mother also revealed that she knew about his infidelity and that I had found a new job, a new place to live, and a new career. She also mentioned that she and her husband were separating. Due to an infidelity, she cried for days and took a week off from work, but found comfort in the arms of her mother before getting married. Her mother never revealed my whereabouts, and I cut all ties with that part of my life, except my ex-fiancé's mother, who has kept our secret to this day. In the end, my ex-fiancé was a ghost.